Welcome back. I'm still David Heavey. I'm still 5'10.5". I'm still a white guy with thick hair. I described it as Irish hair before, and I was given some feedback that not all Irish people have thick hair, so it's just hair now. We're going to commence the day. I will get off the stage now, and we'll start the day rolling.
Hi there. I'm Cecilia Wee. I'm still Cecilia Wee. I'm still the head of artist development at Arts Admin, and I'm following suit after David because we're at the lectern, so we're going to carry on being at the lectern. So welcome back. I've got a couple of announcements about things that are around in the space in the rest of the Unicorn Theatre. So please go and have a look at them, interact with them, because not everybody is excited or interested or wants to always participate in discussions. So during the breakout groups, there's lots of different options that you might want to get involved with. For example, downstairs in the claw dressing rooms, on the ground floor, there's an amazing installation, a collaborative art installation created by Linda Bell, and she's weaving a beautiful, colourful sculpture across the ceiling. And she's also got some beautiful wearable things that you can put on and have a look at. So please do go and check those out. DJ is also doing some one-to-one interventions, movement-based interventions, and that's between some of the floors on the stairs. Please also check out the cards for inclusion that we told you about earlier, and those are in the basement, just outside the toilets, and you can take a pack with you. And finally, there is a video booth next to Linda Bell's art installation space, also on the ground floor. If you really want to tell us, maybe in interpretive dance, or sing a song, and give us your feedback about the event so far. Okay, I will now hand over to Joe. Thank you. Oh, by the way, just to let you know, I am still short. I have an asymmetric bob haircut. I'm not wearing a patterned fabric today, but I am wearing big grey trousers. Thanks. And I'm of Singaporean Chinese descent.
And I'm still Jo Berrent, and I still like being behind a lectern because I'm still short, I'm still tending towards the plump side, and my hair is still grey. Possibly greyer today than it was yesterday, but it's all okay. Just a reminder in terms of access, so we have BSL up here, we have sign-supported English and lip speaking downstairs, if that's your preference. We have the relaxed viewing area, which I think a lot of people really enjoyed yesterday, because you can get up and have a cup of tea while people are speaking. Beanbags, mats, cushions, all available down there. We've asked panellists to audio describe any images that they use as we go through. If you want to go to any of the interventions that Cecilia was mentioning, we have a roving audio describer downstairs and a roving sign language interpreter for networking and the interventions too. Just at reception, ask, and you'll be linked up with them, and they can take you round. Other things in terms of access, do make use of the quiet room. We have a quiet room in one of the dressing rooms where we've got Lego. If anybody just wants to play with Lego for 10, 20 minutes. Yes, people are loving the Lego, excellent. There's ear defenders in all spaces for people who find the noise of loud, I was going to say loud people, that's possibly wrong. The noise of loud events too much. So we have the quiet space, which is a really isolated space. We also have a resting space on the first floor balcony if you want to take time out, but also want to feel more sonically connected to the event. Yeah, excellent, great. So welcome to day 2, and we're really incredibly proud and delighted to have Neil Webb from the British Council here to just kick us off today. British Council is an incredible partner to Unlimited, and it's not just about the cash. It's actually about the genuine partnership and reach that, working together, we've been able to achieve. Over to Neil.
Thank you, Jo.
Let me just readjust the microphone here. So, hello, good morning. I'm Neil, and for anyone that would find it useful, I am a 6 foot, 183 centimetre tall, middle-aged white man with increasingly greying hair. I sense a theme here. Hello again, and welcome. I wasn't here yesterday, and that's because I was hosting a live stream of this event at the British Council. And what a brilliant, gripping, inspirational, and real conversation starter it was. So I'm very excited to actually be in the room today and leave the live streaming to somebody else. Thanks to all the amazing panelists yesterday and today. Right, so I've been asked to talk a little bit about the international impact of our partnership, and I will do that, but I'm going to digress a little bit. The Disability Arts has been part of the British Council's arts programme for 25 years. But 2012, as many of you know, marked a real significant step change. When London won the bid to host the Olympics and Paralympic Games, the Cultural Olympiad made a commitment to do for disabled artists what the Paralympics had done for disabled athletes. I'm very proud to say that the British Council has been on that journey ever since and a founding partner of Unlimited. And it really has been a life-changing experience. Not only because in 2012, in August, I moved to London after 15 years in Asia. And I came back to what was the most open, multicultural, welcoming, diverse, inclusive, and quite frankly, joyful city. Things have changed a little bit since then, but I can honestly say in my lifetime, I have not been part of such a catalytic moment. The profile, positioning, and the subsequent empowerment and impact of disabled artists, both nationally and internationally, has been game-changing, and not before time. Not surprisingly, with a 35-year history, the UK's disability arts sector has come to be universally recognised as a world leader. Many of you in this room were part of that history. All of you are part of the future. Now, I couldn't possibly list all of your recent international achievements, but to give you a flavour, the British Council's Disability Arts Programme now spans 46 countries, from Armenia to Vietnam. Since 2012, in only 6 years, our partnership with Unlimited, and so many of you in this room, has already left a legacy of improved disability awareness, empowerment of disabled people, disabled leadership, flagship disabled arts festivals, mainstream programming, attitudinal, societal change, policy change, improved access in cultural venues, flagship integrated theatre and dance companies, and even the first Minister for Disabilities in Korea. And that's all through your art. Just a few weeks ago, we were also awarded a €2 million contract from Creative Europe, building on the work that we've been doing there, and that will carry on for the next 3 years. So there's a lot of exciting stuff happening, and you're all going to be a part of it. I'm just going to finish because I was up reflecting a lot about what we heard yesterday. And I know we all of us here in the room, listening on the live stream, consider ourselves very inclusive, tolerant, switched on, liberally minded people. Obviously, we all are, that's why we're here. But yesterday's session about intersectionality reminded me that for every other that I identify with or have come to appreciate, there are still so many intersections yet to cross. So to quote the fabulous onesie-wearing, smoky-eyed Tarek yesterday, what would it look like if we centred otherness? Well, I think it would look bloody brilliant, obviously, and it's about time. We are all the change, all of us, and especially those of you in the room who look like me. The provocation from Marlene yesterday was, if you're in a position of power, what are you doing with it? We're all on this journey. The global impact really is profound. But we're also at different stages. So I would ask you to be mindful and forgiving of new learners, who even if they've read their highway code might not be ready yet to be on the motorway by themselves, because they will make mistakes, but we all will. Reach out, support, nurture each other. Try not to judge. Keep your hands off the horn. Don't be afraid to navigate new roads and roundabouts, and maybe even learn to drive on the other side of the road. And when the time is right, put your foot down and break the speed limits. Thank you. Have a brilliant day.
Superb motoring analogy there. I hope the car was electric, you know. Anyway, I'm David Heavey again. I'm still David Heavey. I'm still as I was 5 minutes ago. And I'm just the host. So as the host of the session, all I'm going to do is read out the topic and then get out the way after introducing the chair. And the topic is attitude. And what we mean by that, you know, why is it taking so long? Why is it only 4% of the arts are disabled people? Can you speed up change? And will there ever be getting there? And of course, there's been many conferences, publications, training sessions on disability equality in the arts. Progress is undeniably slow. So how can disabled artists and allies challenge the status quo, take control and make lasting change happen more quickly? That's the theory and thesis. And to take you through it, as the chair is Caroline Bowditch. Now, many of you may have thought she was actually a snail, but because the method acting was so believable. But in fact, she is one of us, a human, and she recently returned to Australia to take up the role of Executive Director of Arts Access Victoria. She was previously an unlimited artist. She is both a creative and a creative leader. So I'll hand over to Caroline to introduce the panel, and I'll get off the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. This is what I actually sound like when I speak English. It was lovely interacting with so many of you yesterday, and who knew so many of you spoke snailese, or snigglese even. For audio description purposes, I am officially short, unlike Joe and Cecilia, who keep saying they're short. I am 3'4" short, or 103 centimetres, depending on where you are in the world. A voluptuous woman in my 40s. You can guess where on the scale. I have curly burgundy hair, and today I'm wearing a black V-neck frock with colourful circles and flowers on it. And I'm sitting on my also ageing but lovely motorised wheelchair, otherwise known as Bertha. I have a manual wheelchair who's called Manuela, of course, but I've come with Bertha today, so yes, she's an essential part of me. As David said, I have recently taken up the role as Executive Director at Arts Access Victoria. Let me tell you a bit about Arts Access Victoria. It was established 40 years ago, and it is the driving force behind inclusive and accessible arts and culture and the cultural sector in Victoria. We're based in Melbourne, and each year we work with approximately 1,900 disabled artists. Yeah, right? It's an amazing number, and I was like, wow, that's incredible. We don't even have that many, but we do. Yeah? We have that many. Somehow, miraculously, Arts Access has managed to capture them. I think there are lots more practising disabled artists who completely slip through the net. And at Arts Access, we've been lucky enough to capture them and therefore have the opportunity to support them in their creative development, and also to provide employment opportunities for them to continue the work that we want to do in changing the industry. I suppose the other significant thing to say is that this is the first time in Arts Access Victoria's 40-year history that they have had a disabled leader at the helm. So, I've been living in the UK for the last 16 years, as lots of you would know, but every year I've kind of gone home just to check in. Are you ready yet? Are you ready to start having those conversations that I want to have? Are you ready to really have the pot stirred? And there are lots of people in Australia that have been stirring that pot in an incredible, incredible way. But what hasn't necessarily happened is that those people haven't necessarily been sitting around the tables that they need to be at. So the voices that needed to be heard haven't been heard in a way that potentially has impact. I have learnt very quickly how important it is to have a visible disability, because I'm not expected. People still kind of do that thing of going, oh, you're the executive director. It's like, oh yeah, weren't you expecting me? Yeah. Well, here I am. Let's begin the conversation. Last year, so the creating of Sniggle came about because there was a realisation that there was no presence of, or very little presence of diversity or disabled bodies in work being presented to children and young audiences. And I know one of the things that Rachel's going to touch on is this thing about we don't achieve anything by complaining, so I had to do something about it. So created Sniggle, which is entertaining people in various places and ways. The other thing that I learnt when I was Dance Agent for Change, which I think actually is the best title that I've ever had, and as a Dance Agent for Change. So Agent for Change was started by Robert Softley Gale. He was the first Agent for Change at Birds of Paradise, which he now is the artistic director of. I was then Dance Agent for Change, and then Arts Council England adopted Agents for Change as a thing. It was like, I know it's not unique to us, but we like to think that it started in Scotland, and England followed us up on that one. But one of the things that I learnt in that role was that change, in order to change, it has to happen from the inside, and it has to happen from a place where you can be a decision maker. It can't happen by sitting in the margins at the peripheries anymore. We can have all the allies that we want, but as the brilliant Veronica Pardo, who was the ED before me, has said to me recently, we can have allies, but actually what we need is accomplices. So I have come to you looking for accomplices and encouraging you to be accomplices as well as allies, to really be in it with disabled artists, to continue and allow that leadership to happen. But we're here to talk about change. I love change because I think it's the place of incredible possibility. It's the place where actually anything can happen and we can reshape and reform in a way that actually works for us, all of us. But innately, lots of people hate change. It involves unfamiliarity, uncertainty, and can be really uncomfortable for people. Comfort zones regularly dissolve and disappear. It can mean questioning potentially everything that you know, all that you do, acknowledging your privilege and your biases, which one may or may not acknowledge or be aware of. It's often about surrendering power, and especially having an urgency to modify a learned, ingrained behaviour, to potentially change a life direction, and to even step aside and make room for someone else, which is exactly what Veronica did in allowing her to step aside and me to step in. And I will be eternally grateful for that. That's enough about me. We have an amazing panel of people, but I am here as the pot stirrer. For lots of years, you'll know that in the UK, I describe myself as a mosquito that buzzed in the ear of the arts industry. Yeah, just asking those really annoying questions. I'm going to continue to do that with this panel. I have encouraged them to be as provocative as they can be because I think that's what we need. We need to be stirring the conversation. Yeah, we need to not be polite about it, but actually to be stirring it up. So, on the panel, I am joined by the gorgeous Abby Watson, who is a talented young performance maker, passionate about making complex risk-taking and accessible performance for a wide variety of audiences. Rachel Caldecott, who is the CEO of Everyone UK. No? Everyone. That's it. And you'll tell us more about what they do. And Abid Hussain, who is the head of diversity, leading Arts Council England's Creative Case for Diversity, and the lovely Paula Lopez, who is from Creative Accessibility in Brazil. So you're really bringing our international flavour to the panel. So Abby's going to kick us off.
Yes.
Brilliant. Abby and I have a long history. And I started as one of Abby's mentors, so it's brilliant to have you on the panel.
Yeah,
so
it's great to be here. I'm totally itching to get out of this chair, by the way, so I'm going to stand back here if that's okay. That works for everybody, okay? Yep, okay, great. So hello, everybody. As Caroline said, my name is Abby Watson. I am, I was going to say short, but now I'm like, I'm 5'1.5". The half is important. I have short brunette hair. I'm white. I am not wearing glasses today. I'm in a white stripy dress, some trousers and some trainers, and I have earrings on. Okay, so it's really wonderful to be here with everybody today. I'm a contemporary performance maker and dance artist based in Glasgow in Scotland. And behind me, if I could get the first slide, please, this is a picture of myself with only my torso in frame. I'm wearing a black unitard and I'm standing in a laundrette, as you do. And one of the washing machines, I don't know if you can see it on this because it's quite dark, but one of the washing machines behind me says the word Speed Queen. And as someone that has learning difference, I find that quite an interesting title for this image. So I'll begin my bit by telling you a wee bit about myself and my work, and then I'll share with you my own perspective and creative agency in relation to how disabled artists and our allies can instigate change. So I make solo performances, and they use dance, choreography, action, text, objects, and autobiography to explore different elements of being human. Tell me if I'm going too quick, by the way, sorry. Yep. Okay, great, thank you. I'm also currently doing a practice-based PhD, and it's titled Choreographing Clumsy, Dyspraxia and Choreographic Practice, which is all about exploring the possibilities of a dance practice that embraces, experiments with, and is enhanced by the dysfunctionality of dyspraxia. Yes! Neurodiverse! Yes! Hi! Dyspraxic's in the house! Say that again? We'll talk about it. I'm very excited about that. Let's do it. So I'm neurodiverse, and I have dyslexia and dyspraxia, and they are my lens to how I understand and occupy the world. So I won't be straying too far into like heady, cerebral academic chat today, but old habits do die quite hard, so I'd quite like to start with a quote. I'm sorry. Next slide, please. And this quote, which is written in my own handwriting, says, "Human competence is defined by the values of the culture to which you belong." And that was said by Dr. Thomas Armstrong in 2010. On page 13 of his book, The Power of Neurodiversity, Unleashing the Advantages of Your Differently Wired Brain. And I identify with this quote. I feel like it says a lot about our current situation. And I feel this quote can be read in two ways. So it can be read from a mainstream perspective where perceptions of ability, value, and success, got an itchy nose, are defined by the exclusive values of mainstream culture. And the unquestioned status quo creates incorrect assumptions of the potential of disabled artists. Yet we can also take this quote from the perspective of disabled culture and the values of the disability arts movement, where human value and potential are understood on a more inclusive level, where there is space for those exclusive norms themselves to be challenged, and frequently cast aside to enable and encourage creativity and possibility that also uncovers new, artistic, exciting ground. And of course, we know that the values of these two cultures currently don't match up, so we're in this non-harmonious situation where change on the mainstream level is still desperately needed. So how do we do that? How do those exclusive values and resulting problematic opinions of competency be shifted so that change can happen and disabled artists can work without barriers and exclusion and get out there and make art and do their amazing stuff? And that's why we're here today, to discuss this really tricky problem. So my short and very honest answer is I don't know. I don't know. And when I was writing this presentation, I really struggled with what to say in response, because this problem of how to speed up change is so colossal and complicated, and I don't know the path forward. But I do know that it must include change from all across the industry, like commitment to change from various arts councils and other gatekeepers, inclusive training and development offered from institutions, support and opportunity from different venues, platforms, and other sectors and organizations, and those opportunities to be routinely offered to disabled companies and artists. And that's a whole lot of responsibility required, like everywhere. And I am one artist. Yeah, I am one artist. So I said to myself, I am one artist, and one artist can still, that's still a powerful position to assist change. And I had to remind myself of that. And I am one artist with a strong, passionate agency and unique perspective and context to this problem, and I'm going to tell you about it. If I'm going over, could you tell me as well? Is that all right? I'm looking at you. You're there. Could you tell me if I'm like super behind on time?
Yeah,
okay.
And then at 10 minutes I will start to
Okay, great. Great.
Which no one's going to want.
Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, so before that though, I feel like I'm running short on time, so maybe I won't do this bit, but I'll just describe this slide very quickly, and this is the promotional image for my new performance, Ish, which is going to be on Sunday at the Unlimited Festival, so please come. It would be really nice to have people there, please come. And here I'm standing in some relaxed exercise wear. I'm wearing a grey t-shirt and black joggers. There is a helium balloon made of foil, and it's yellow, and it's in front of my face, and I'm catching it, and there is a space hopper, a white one, on the ground, and it's merging into the background. Okie dokies. So, as I said, I'm a dyspraxic dancer and solo artist, and my individual agency is carried through my practice and my position as a neurodiverse dance maker. I want to challenge the exclusive values of what makes good dancing. I want to question why. Why does dance culture obsess over gracefulness? Why is there an expectation of being in unison, both in group choreography but on the wider scale? So why do we still privilege specific choreographic vocabularies? Why is virtuosity centered on physical prowess and slick execution? Why does choreography need to be made of complex sequences that need to be remembered and performed perfectly? Where is the room for mistakes? Where is the space for stickiness? Where is the room for happy accidents in the performance itself? And these are the questions that fuel my practice and give me ammunition to interrogate them through performance. And of course, disabled choreographers have been asking questions similar to this for long before I've started asking these questions. And obviously Caroline Brodich is a huge figure in those. And I was going to say that I was lucky to shadow you when you were Agent for Change at Scottish Dance Theatre, and that was a hugely important time for me, and still is. So I hope to build on the ground laid by the artists that come before me by offering a neurodiverse perspective. So what fresh, interesting newness can neurodivergent and different ways of thinking, perceiving, communicating, and moving bring to dance culture? So I seek to utilize the agency of the solo artist and the authorship of the choreographer to carve out a niche that delves into the potential and possibility of a dyspraxic practice. Yeah! Yes, I'm so glad you're here. And I can aspire, and I also am interested in how that can also push the confines of how we understand a choreographic practice to be. So it's also expanding just understandings of choreography in general. 1 minute. Okay, here we go. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is a GIF. It's a wee moving image, and I'm in a grey studio dancing. I'd like to describe my movement quality as kind of angular, awkward and heavy, but it's also fluid, constant and smooth. And the words, I'm just a walking contradiction. The words, I want to challenge the exclusive values of what makes good dancing, flash up one by one in bold capital letters. So to conclude, and bring this back to the wider conversation about change for disabled artists, I want to say that I genuinely believe that utilising the act of creating and disseminating art is an incredibly powerful thing to do, and I wanted to remind myself of that and put that in the room today. I can also personally find it tiring and difficult, and at times I can still feel a lot of the internalised shame that I'm still carrying. And being a disabled artist and trying to make change happen, I have to remember it requires resilience, patience, strength, and aggression. But it's an incredibly powerful position, and this position can be used to instigate change on the individual level as well as the global level. Artistic expression gives us the opportunity to agitate, challenge. Oh no, she's going! Oh no, don't make me rap it! I'll say the last sentence, is that okay? And then I'll be done. Okay. No, this is great. We can do some like duo thing going. Oh, sorry. I'm dyspraxic. I have trouble with time. Okay, so making and showing art enables us to write our own representation, narrative, and identification, and it's crucial that disabled artists receive the support necessary for them to develop their potential, make and showcase work, for their individual agency to take hold and to disperse through culture, instigating change. Thanks, babe. Jeez, oh. Sorry, that's. I'm sorry, by the way. That to interpret must have been. I was like. No, you were fine. Okay, great.
That was brilliant. Sorry to interrupt such important things with my interpretive dance, but it's the best way I know to time keep. You see? I was going to bring, in Australia we have these things called minties. There's a minty technique. So at 2 minutes someone hands you a minty. At 1 minute left you take the wrapper off. And if you're at time's up, you have to put it in your mouth and finish your presentation with it in your mouth. But I forgot to bring them with me, so I just had to go with what I know, which is contemporary dance. Thank you, Abs, for such a brilliant and gorgeous insight and really such honest questioning.
Thanks.
It's a lovely thing. Thank you. Rachel.
Let's go.
Is BBC One. And now plenty of ideas for things to do as we join the Cardiff team who say, why don't you?
Thank you. Hello. I'm Rachel. And anyone who has heard that before will know I'm in my 40s. Yeah. That is the theme of a British TV show that was on in the holidays in the early 80s, I guess. So I am 5'6", I've got brown hair, I'm wearing a large necklace and a white top, and I have a stutter, which means it's actually quite hard for me to explain things. I just have to keep talking, so bear with me. Right, what am I here to talk about? I'm talking about changing the future. And I used to work in the arts, and I don't anymore. And I don't because it drove me crazy, right? Because there were either loads of people moaning or loads of people ignoring me. And later on, there were people who were sort of not, who had listened, but were maybe not crediting. And I just found it quite tiring. But all the time that I was working in the arts, I was working in tech. So I was someone who did very early internet art stuff. And now I'm running a think tank. And I think the tanks are weird things. They basically create the change without often having visible outputs. And one of the things we try to do at Everyone is not just talk about things, not just write about things, but make things happen and make change. And the area that we're working in that is not directly relevant here, but I'll explain it for context, is trying to make technology be responsible and good for everyone. So I've been working in the internet since 1996, and at that point it was a great democratizing, open thing. And the thing that has happened over the last 20 years is that really a lot of the ways that technology is changing the world are entrenching old power and inequalities and creating new ones. And we're trying to make a world that changes that, which is really hard. It's really hard. And it's partly really hard because a lot of the things we're trying to change are happening really fast. So if I was working in a think tank that was trying to improve housing or health outcomes, I might have the ability to ask someone to do 3 years of a PhD understanding the change. But I'm trying to create change in a context where things are happening now. They happened a week ago, a month ago. And there's this kind of weird thing I feel that's happening with tech where it's kind of making time thicker and denser and bigger and harder to understand. And so rather than kind of waiting 5 years to work out how to do it, what we're trying to do is make the change now. And I've got 5 strategies. So the first most important thing to just remember is that just as complaining doesn't work, neither does wishing or hoping, right? So magic doesn't happen. I have a picture here of the rabbit in a hat. And a lot of the time, it looks like magic has happened, but that's only because you can't see the furious pedaling that's happening under the water. So, the thing number 1, understand the system. Often, when you're trying to create the change, it's because you're unhappy, right? And you're centering lots of your thoughts and the feelings on you. And that actually, if you're trying to create the change, it's important to understand the system, to understand not only the things that are making you unhappy, but the other actors, the other things that are happening that could appear to not be relevant. This here is the system that we're working in. It's got lots of blobs on, but there are 3 main areas. We're interested in the tech industry, in government, and in a civil society. And they're like 3 areas that don't really come together. You get lots of bilateral meetings, so the civil society and tech engage government take and engage, but they don't really kind of come together in the round, and a three-way conversation is really hard. But we're interested in kind of both bringing them together and like understanding the things that are happening in maybe more subtle, different ways. Building on Caroline's point, I think allies, step 2, I have, excuse me, that's necklace juggling, find allies. And the reason that allies are important is a lot of the time you don't really realise there are other people who are trying to do the same thing, but they're maybe doing it differently, and they may feel to you like they're competing. They may feel to you like they're just really annoying, right? That you're like trying to do something and they keep doing a similar thing that's different, that isn't as good, or, right? And that actually, it's really important to put your ego aside. And the other thing is, there's a lot of the strength and opportunity that comes from working with others. It doesn't have to be all about big, joined up bits of work. It can be just about spending time and talking and acknowledging and recognising. Step 3 is about telling stories. Now, there's a thing I'm kind of interested in about the here and now, which is to everyone their own like understanding of now is very, very clear, right? And how everything is working is extremely clear. But that it's very difficult to realise that other people look at the world differently, and that they could be looking at the same thing and see something totally different. And that actually, if you can tell stories that break through, that bring it to life, that's a huge opportunity. And in the breakout afterwards, I'll be giving away a book. Come along, pick up a book, which is an example of the way that we have tried to create a different kind of change. And I don't have time to talk about it now, so come then. Super fast, speeding up. Okay, so the other important thing is most people can't imagine things. They can only see the here and now. And if you want them to understand a different thing, show it to them. Make it happen. And that, like, a thing that I found is when you start making things happen, people join in, which leads to my last point, which is make it easy for others to join in, right? It's very easy to get up on a high horse and be like, right, I'm here now. I'm here. I'm doing it. And that actually, if the change is about a community, about the wider world, it isn't just about you, then don't make it about, I guess, your ego. Don't make it about a specific outcome. Make it about bringing others together and making it easy to take part. And I'm done. Thank you very much.
Rachel, you win the prize for stopping right on time without me needing to launch into any dance. Thank you. That was absolutely so great to have it so clearly laid out. It's like, this is how you make change, which is amazing. So thank you so much. Let's got you up next, Paula. Yeah?
Does it change?
Let's go with you. Is that okay?
Fine.
Great.
All right. I wasn't prepared, so I need my time, my watch.
Okay.
When do you start?
I start as soon as you start.
Okay.
Are you ready? Synchronise our
Yes.
watches.
Ah.
1, 2, 3, go.
Okay, hello everyone. I was caught in surprise. This surprised me. I wasn't ready, but never mind. This is life, and I'm Paula Lopez, Sousa Lopez. I descend from a family, from a Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian family. So my skin, they say my skin is green, it's olive green. And I like that because I don't like calling myself white, and I couldn't say anything else, so green is good. I am 1 meter 65 centimeters, which is okay. I have long hair, but it's tied up at the back. I'm wearing a short dress patterned with flowers that resembles passion fruit flowers, and it's mainly green, like my skin, and also there's blue and a touch of orange. I'm wearing tights, brown tights, and boots that in England, or I don't know if in Scotland they say that, but in England they would say it's mousy, is it? Or brown, I don't know. It's okay because people see colors in different ways, so, and it's a cultural issue, it's a cultural item. So it's okay. I have rings. I'm wearing a red ring and my mom's ring on my left hand. And today I'm happy to be here, really happy to be here, really, really honored, and also very sad for what happened to the National Museum in Brazil. So I need to bring this subject in because a part of my job is to work with museums and galleries in Brazil. And I know the people who worked there. They were trying to be part of the network. We have an unlimited network in Rio, and it's some cultural spaces, managers, and education department managers as well, coming and gathering every month to discuss accessible resources, to discuss accessible programming, and how can we be more inclusive and mix audiences. And these people from the National Museum tried very much to be part of that for some time, and they could never do it because they didn't have money, not enough money to do the basics. So the changes that the building needed weren't there, so they couldn't come, to take part of that opportunity to be more inclusive. So I'm really sad, and I think, as lots of people say in Brazil, we will rebuild this heritage through digital material, through gathering images that people have, recordings that people have. We lost recordings from the indigenous people, the more than 200 nations that Brazil's formed. So, well, this wasn't part of the plan to speak, so I think I asked Caroline to give me 1.5 minutes, and I'm already in 3 and 30 seconds. So I am a proud mom of an 18-year-old boy called Davi, and I have been working professionally within the arts since I was 17. I'm a performer, a translator, producer, and I am now an audio describer. Very happy to do that. Behind me, there's, I'll be standing now. Now I am facing at my back, I have, Sarah's there. And, I can't be here. Never mind. This is Arts Creative Access, Acessibilidade Criativa is the name of what I've been doing. And I'm from Brazil. And this is my email, Paula Souza Lopez with Z, Souza and Lopez, @gmail.com. I haven't got business cards with me, so please do, I invite you to write to me if you want. So I have a question for all of us, including myself. What is the difference between these two sentences? May I help you? And do you need some help? What's the subject in each of the questions? Yeah, I was delivering a workshop in Sao Paulo, and this lady, one of the young persons who were in this workshop, it was like a young group of people who will be working in an exhibition that was going to open, and they wanted to learn more about disabled people, how to welcome disabled people to cultural spaces. And one of the ladies told a story and said, "Oh, I asked that question to a man. I saw he was blind, and he was trying to catch the underground train. And I asked him, 'Can I help you?' And that struck me because of the subject. So, who was to be empowered in that situation? Her, because of her guilt or because of her drive. Maybe she's a nice person and she wants to help, but she haven't thought about it. So by the time I asked her, what's the difference in subject if you say, do you need some help? Because then you give the power to the disabled person to decide whether they want help or not. So this is very much the way I've been understanding disability arts, the social model of disability, and also my role. I don't identify neither as a disabled person nor as a non-disabled person. I've been rethinking all of these terms and the way we are in the world. So I come from a very large country. It's nearly 214 million people. It's enormous. We have 26 states, plus the capital, 5,570 municipalities, and 17 municipalities, 17 cities have more than 1 million inhabitants, amounting 45.5 million people. The same number as people who identify themselves as being disabled. So it's like nearly a fourth of the population of Brazil identifying themselves as being disabled, and they are not going to the theaters. Now they are starting, but very few. I come from a very privileged environment. São Paulo is really privileged. It's huge, but we can't forget that I'm only a tiny sandstone within, a huge beach. It's nearly nothing. But we've been doing a lot. We have here Claudio and Marcel from Brazil, and they've been doing loads. They've been working really hard, and their cultural spaces are becoming more and more inclusive for the past 4 to 5 years. Because I value translation very much, I'll seem to go back to language, of course. And I noticed that for the disabled artists to be a leader of their own creation and find space to develop their work, they had to be outspoken and confident in written and spoken and gestural language, but this is not enough in most of the cases. The barriers are countless and very small financial support. So I found out that my role would be create contexts in which disabled artists would be protagonists, gather, get together, and flourish. So there's a whole story about what I do, but I would like to show one disabled artist from Brazil. He's called Kleber Tolini, and he's a 40-year-old guy. This photograph is colored. He's facing a bud of tangerine. He's holding a bud of tangerine with his right hand, and he's looking at it. And this bud is the size of the tumor he had in his brain. And then because of that tumor, which is a medical model explanation, but he uses that within his show. And he's created a brilliant show that when you watch it, it's so powerful because he begins the show telling the whole diagnosis and the surgery he went through. But then it's so funny because he starts talking about being partially sighted. And he pretended not being partially sighted for 15 years. He went on working and trying to do things, trying to pretend he wasn't nearly blind. But in the end, he met, a whole community of partially sighted people and started by the work he's done. I'm not going to show the rest of my material because I have exceeded my time, but I still need to tell you about a performance, a show we created in Brazil called A Princesinha Medrosa, the Little Fearful Princess. So if we could move along to the next one, yeah. It's really dark. It's really dark. So let's see if my audio description works. Colored photograph, black background. At the center, 4 characters gather around a small wooden chest. At the back, there's a little fearful princess dressing her pink gown and a crown made of golden thin wire and colored beads. At her sides, the guards. One is a man, Marcos Suchara, dressing checker patterned trousers. Opposite to him, the female guard, Manuela Afonso, wearing tights with the same pattern, checked. Both have jackets similar to military ones, but made of floral fabric. But both guards have a lampshade on top of their heads, as if it were a hat. In front of the male guard, there's Amanda Assis, the sign language interpreter, to whom we created a character, Miss Stage Woman. The guards and Amanda are touching a 4-layered tower made of transparent glasses. The tower is on top of a tray that lays over the chest. All of them have their eyes shut. Princesinha is a touching story of this little fearful princess who is afraid of the dark, of being alone, of losing all she has, and one day she meets a friend by the river and learns how to listen to the stars with her eyes shut. It is a case study. It brings together audiences who they wouldn't imagine sitting beside them on a regular programming, because Princesinha has audio description within the playwriting. The dramaturgy included the description of everything that is happening throughout the play, and we have this brilliant 3 actors signing throughout the play, and they are not disabled artists, but they understood that we need to make mainstream work for more people, for a larger audience. And they learned how to sign in 1 week and a half. They trained with a teacher, with a consultant, and then when deaf people come and watch the show, they come to us and say, I haven't had such experience ever in my life. Our consultant said, throughout my childhood, I would go to children's birthday parties, and there were shows or magicians, and I couldn't understand a thing. And when I watched Princesinha, I could understand. I could feel included, and I could sit wherever I wanted. I didn't have to choose a specific seat to be in front of the sign language interpreter. So I think including resources, the accessible resources, into our practices is one way for change, one of the possible ways. It's not the only one, but it's one that is powerful and can be very provocative and interesting to challenge the mainstream sector. Thank you very much.
Thank you. No, don't be sorry. It was great. It was great. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Our last speaker is Abed Hussain, and I will hand over to you, Abed.
Thank you. For audio description purposes, I'm a British Muslim of Pakistani heritage. I have a short beard, short hair, wearing reading glasses. I'm not white. I'm the shade of a good cup of English tea with a drop or 2 of milk. I am also wearing a T-shirt which has a David Bowie-inspired stormtrooper on the front of it. And hopefully by the end of this presentation, you can decide whether I'm part of the rebellion or part of the dark side. Today, I want to speak to you from the perspective of an accomplice. So that's my first bit of improv for the day, and why this work matters to me. I would not be here today if it wasn't for the disability arts movement. Back in 2001, I was working at the National Grid, the company responsible for managing the UK gas pipeline network. It was during my time there that I was introduced to Zoe Partington at the West Midlands Disability Arts Forum. It was Zoe who introduced me to the social model of disability and the world of disability and deaf arts. She inspired my curiosity in the arts, giving me both the confidence and the encouragement to apply for a job in an industry as far removed from gas pipelines as you can imagine. We do share a common trend of the occasional bits of hot air, but we digress. A couple of months later, I accepted a junior job at the Arts Council as an assistant officer working on diversity and audience development. The job came with a condition. I had to shadow an arts organisation. That organisation turned out to be Dash, where I met Mike Laywood and Tanya Rabe. Zoe was my first ally and champion. Mike and Tanya, they kind of adopted me. 17 years later, I remain grateful for their support, friendship, the occasional telling off, but most of all, their act of kindness and love. The type of love that makes you believe in yourself, care about the work you do, and the people around you. It gives us the drive and the fire to do what we do and keep doing it, even when we think we have nothing left to give. Marlene captured the spirit of that work beautifully yesterday in a much better way than I ever could. Disabled and deaf people are significantly underrepresented in the arts across the world. As Caroline reflected in her blog, we know this from the conferences we attend, the publications we commission, and the data we capture. This applies across artists and curators, producers and directors, policymakers and funders. So why is change taking so long? Exclusion is a major part of that problem. The exclusion of disabled and deaf people is nothing new. It goes back decades. So many stories were shared with us yesterday, and I'm sure we'll share other stories today. It gave rise to the disability arts movement in the 70s, which has been beautifully documented through the National Disability Arts Collection and Archive launched earlier this year by Shape Arts. Exclusion results in monocultural organizations and a shift in the center of power. These organizations become difficult to penetrate and to change from within. Our networks become closed, we deal only in the familiar, we build more barriers, and the cycle repeats. We can begin to break that cycle today. Reach out to someone you don't know over coffee or the breakout session. Expand your circle of trust, share ideas, take a leap of faith. One introduction changed the course of my career. Can we do the same for someone here today? So what is the backdrop for policymakers? Globally, we're witnessing a shift in politics to the right. Nationalism is increasing across Europe, America, and Asia. In today's world, even my name, Abid Hussain, defines me as a greater risk to society than my colleagues named Darren, Simon, or Lucy. You don't want to travel with me to airports. A lived experience of any injustice should make us allies and accomplices to others who face discrimination for other reasons. Initiatives designed to advance equity and fairness are increasingly met with cynicism and criticism. Austerity measures have resulted in cuts to public spending, creating new barriers. The changes to Access to Work scheme in the UK have had a major impact on disabled and deaf artists. The very legislation that's designed to offer protection can sometimes have the opposite effect and hold back progress. The change we need to see may not be comfortable for some, but for others it's necessary, vital, and long overdue. We're missing the creativity and the influence of disabled and deaf leaders in the very arts organizations that need their vision, their expertise, and their challenge most. Exclusion can deny opportunities, but it can't deny excellence. Today, the majority of our disabled and deaf artists and leaders are more likely to work independently or within organizations committed to advancing disability and deaf arts. Organizations including Grey Eye, Dada Fest, Extant, Drake Music, and Vital Exposure. It should not be a case of either or. We should and must have both. Those missed opportunities and the Agents for Change program helped inspire the launch of our Changemakers initiative, a program developed to invest in a cohort of 20 disabled and black and minority ethnic leaders. Through the Changemakers program, composer James Rose and Bournemouth Symphony Orchestra have established the world's first disabled-led ensemble as part of a professional orchestra. They made their debut at the BBC Proms last month. Yesterday, you heard from Jess Toms and Andrew Miller, 2 other members of our Changemaker cohort. The guidance for the fund when we launched it required joint applications from a named disabled or black leader and a partner organisation. As artists, leaders and policymakers, we can't change the past, but we have a responsibility to shape and change the future. We must create the conditions for all our stories to be told in the work presented on our stages, in our galleries and across our museums. Stories that are produced, curated and told by disabled and deaf artists themselves. That is essentially what the creative case for diversity is. And I'm going to digress again here slightly because I was listening yesterday during the conversation around the creative case for diversity, and this is what the creative case for diversity is. If we can't understand that, then I think we're in the wrong sector. I have 3 daughters. Their names are Miriam, Aisha, and Anissa. I can't remember the last time I went to the theatre where characters on stage had those names. If my daughters don't see themselves reflected in our work, how can we inspire them to want to work in our sector? Caroline posed the question, can we speed up change? I believe we can. In 2016, we launched the Elevate programme to strengthen the resilience of arts organisations working to advance equality and equity. It's the first time ever the Arts Council has launched a strategic funding initiative open only to arts organisations not in receipt of regular funding. Elevate recognised the need for change and greater equity. How could we support the very arts organisations that were delivering high-quality, diverse work to not just survive, but flourish? This means being able to pay staff, invest in your boards, and having the resources to develop strategic business plans. All the things that are so important to the arts organisations in England and the world, but are often the most difficult to secure funding for. Investment that pays for the time to have creative conversations, develop artistic partnerships, raise income and strengthen your governance. We started with a budget of £2 million. We ended up investing £5.3 million across 40 organisations. I knew things were beginning to change when I went to Darren and our executive board for more money. If you don't ask, you don't get. Or it could have been a Jedi mind trick that I played on him. In 2017, 20 of those organisations successfully applied for national portfolio funding and will receive regular funding over the next 4 years. I'd like to close by reflecting on where we are as an Arts Council. We're setting higher expectations on our national portfolio organisations to diversify their programmes, audiences and the workforce. Those that receive more funding should do more. It was important to hear from Darren yesterday that we will take action where organisations don't deliver on their responsibility. We can't keep talking about aspiration, we need to see change. Only 6% of our staff at the Arts Council self-define as disabled. That's not good enough. I want us to be an organisation disabled and deaf people want to work for. To be an effective ally, we need more disabled and deaf people leading our work on policy development and making funding decisions. I want us to be open to challenge and collaboration. Change is a collective responsibility. We're currently consulting with the sector on developing our 10-year strategy. It's a genuine opportunity to shape our vision and priorities for the future. It's my hope that by 2030, we are no longer talking about change, but actively engaged and benefiting from it. Institutions don't change unless the people who run them do. If we're not prepared to change, then we should hand over power and funding to those who are. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abid. We've got 5 minutes. It's just so exciting. before we need to move on. So I've got a question to all of you, because we're going to break up into groups in a minute and have a conversation, but I've got a question for all of these guys, which is the question, how do we know when it's done? It's never done.
I mean, that's the thing, is that it depends on what you want to achieve. Because if you're just creating a change for you, your change can go from A to B. But actually change needs to, the problem is that if you think it's done, there'll be other people who are excluded for other reasons. Sorry. Oh, sorry. So, and that's it.
Just following off what you were saying, I guess to say how do we know when it's done suggests there's like an end game, or there's like the thing that we're all searching for, but actually that's not how the world works. The work, oh my goodness, you can tell I'm making a piece of performance. I'm like, the work. No, the world is always in flux and always moving forward. So maybe it's about the gap being shortened and moving, I don't know, there's like a different future. I don't know. Is that clear? Okay.
I think it's evolving. I don't think we can accept that there's a certain standard that we need to reach. I mean, I was talking to Ruth earlier this morning, and one of the things we were reflecting on earlier after yesterday's conversation was about when we use the term mainstream. And actually, I think mainstream's kind of become short code for who gets the big funding. And I guess one of the things I was thinking about when I was speaking to Ruth is, what would someone like Ruth be able to do if she had the budget, for example, of a national theatre? And I could tell by her smile and what she's doing in the audience right now, you would see incredible difference. So I think it's about having different people in positions of power who can actually make things happen.
Yeah, could I just say that setting a goal in time, then I think you are done by bits. So you set a goal and then you're done. So when I watched Wendy Who's, and I have to thank the British Council because my life wouldn't have changed 5 years ago if it wasn't for the program and developing the program in Brazil. And Wendy Who's was a show that inspired me to create a Princesinha the way it is at the moment. We couldn't do that with disabled artists because it was a project thought by non-disabled artists, but they were really keen on exploring the possibilities, the artistic, the aesthetics of this new language. We recreated something new, innovative. So that goal, that is done, but that is not enough. That is just the beginning of something that might explode. And we need more multipliers. We need more people doing what we are doing here. And spreading the word and really impacting other practitioners or other artists or cultural managers.
Great, and we need to be making that easy.
And we need money.
Yeah,
of
and
course.
We need money.
We need
Lots
money.
of money.
Of course, we do.
Money! Brilliant. I know that David's about to tell us which rooms we're going to go to, but I would just love all of you to please thank the incredible presentations.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Thank you very much to the panel. And as the usual format, we're going to break out into groups now. So the Western is Rachel Caldecott and Abby Watson, chaired by Abid. At the Claw is Caroline Bowditch. At the Foil is Paula Lopez. And at the JLR is moi. So go where you like, and you don't have to go into these. You can go see the art, you can chill out, you do what you like. There will be refreshments in each of the breakout areas. So we'll go straight on to that now. So we'll see you all in about 5 or 10 minutes in those zones. Thank you very much.
Hi everyone. I think when everyone tries to find a seat, we're going to get started with this discussion panel. Yeah, so please find a seat. Hope you've all managed to have a little break and all that thing. And I'll hand over to Abid.
Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, I'm on.
I think we're all mic'd up.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you guys. So we're gonna start the discussion, and the way I want to structure it, and I'm gonna give a warning, I'm not the best at chairs, so please bear with me. What I'd like to do is, you've been incredibly patient with us and listened to us, so what I'd like to do is maybe start with a few questions and comments from the audience, and then I'm going to hand over to Rachel and Abby again, because there's some further kind of thoughts and provocations that you want to share, and then we'll open up a second round of Q&A after that. And again, if you've got any questions directly for me, I can try and answer some now, or during lunch, or later on today. But shall we start with any immediate questions? And I'm thinking we'll take 3 or 4, and then we come back to the panel.
I know I asked this yesterday, but I think it can't be asked too often of the Arts Council. I think I'm an optimist like you are, Abid, and I think the creative case is great. I think we could see a tipping point happening in disability arts as a result of the greater requirements on NPOs having to address the creative case. I'm slightly concerned, and actually this was raised by another Arts Council officer, that actually the big boys in the arts, the people with the money that you talked about earlier, might address the creative case in a very tokenistic tick box way. They can get around it. We'll have a black actor, we'll have a disabled actor, but the ownership still rests with the powers that be. And I just want to stress again, I think the powerhouse of change in the UK has been the disability arts movement. And I'd like to see the Arts Council having a role in making a connection between, the smaller organisations that we represent and those people with the money.
Yeah.
Not because we want the money, but because we want the change. Yeah, the spirit.
Take the money as well, Gus. Genuinely, I'll make a quick response to that, because I think there's 2 aspects to that. I think one is what I spoke about in my presentation around actually supporting disabled and deaf artists and leaders first and foremost, but also I guess the accountability and the responsibility for other organisations. I took on this job in 2014, so that's my starting point. And for me, I think it was absolutely essential that all the organisations we fund take their responsibility seriously. And I think some of the things we've introduced more recently have been designed to respond to that concern. So I understand where the concern comes from, but genuinely I think we're putting in place the mechanisms to kind of begin to address that and increase accountability. It's not the easiest thing to demonstrate straight away, and that's me being very candid. The policy work does take a bit of time to change, and that's why I think we've got this really interesting 10-year horizon in terms of what happens between now, the development of our next 10-year strategy, and what that change needs to look like. And I'm not talking about what change looks like in 2030. We will have moments along the way that we need to make decisions that make sure that change happens. And genuinely, I think from what Darren said yesterday, and I think what you might hear from Nick later today if you're attending the opening of the Unlimited Festival, I feel the change that's happening within the Arts Council is there's a genuine buy-in and commitment to this change at the executive and national council level that I've probably not seen at this level before. Any other questions? One.
Hi. I just wanted to thank Abby for introducing neurodivergence into the conversation so clearly. I think, and I actually nobbled Hussein, a bit, I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
That's embarrassing. About this earlier. But I think working very closely with artists who experience a lot of mental health issues and other forms of neurodivergence like ADHD, etc. I think, I'm encouraged. I asked Abid, for example, could an artist who has a mental health issue and really needs the support of a producer to be able to achieve their work include that as an access cost in their application? And he told me he thinks they could, which to me is amazing. I think, recognizing that disability can be invisible and that we as people who work to support artists need to understand the complexities of that from the beginning of our relationships with them, I think is really crucial. And it's something, I think mental health in particular is one that artists feel incredibly reluctant to disclose because of concern about their commissioners or other people basically going, I can't trust this person to get the job done because I don't know if they're going to have a breakdown. I think that's a really big problem. So I'm just really, really would like us to be able to speak openly about that. And Abby, I'm grateful that you've said, this is my situation. It's not visible, but I want to disclose it, and I want to be supported in doing that, and I want to make work that brings that to the fore. So I just wanted to introduce that into the conversation.
Thank you. Well, actually, I'm going to do a little presentation after this, and the whole thing is about invisible difference and what that means, and particularly in relation to the piece of work that I am showing on Sunday that has been supported by Unlimited. So I will talk more about that when we pick up in a slightly more formal situation.
Just behind you.
Hello. What was it? Sorry, I've lost my question. Thank you. Because I'm neurodivergent as well. I'm dyslexic ASD. My question actually, it's more of a UK question, so apologies because it's amazing how many people have come so far and wide. Honestly, I'm astonished. It's brilliant. But I want to know people's, it's a bit of a straw poll question, what your feelings about the EBAC coming into the UK educational system, i.e. STEM being put before the arts and the arts being pulled back and made or associated as a soft skill, how you think that's going to affect future generations coming up. Because for me, as a neurodivergent artist, I was reliant on having art and CDT and those more creative aspects within my schooling, and I don't think I would have survived without them. And also the other thing is, in terms of funding, those kids that could possibly get an arts education are going to be from the richer end as opposed to the poorer end of society, so they have better access. So how do you think that may change the face of the arts world, and should we be pushing back on the EBAC more than we are?
What's EBAC?
It's the European Baccalaureate that was brought in by the UK government, and it was brought in about 15 to 10 years ago, and it's been cognitive-based therapy.
Is that for everyone?
Yes, that's just kind of general. So.
Yeah.
Is there any responses to that in the audience? Or cool, we can come back to that in a second. Any other questions? Comments?
I just think that in the arts, I wish I went to a special needs school, and I have learning difficulties. And you're really good, but I found what you were talking was a bit inaccessible, which you're really good at you talking, both of you. I just found it was a bit too much information over tea.
Yeah.
But I think there should be something for special need and mental health. I think invisible disability is hard because, like here today, I suffer with anxiety, and it's here today, and I think you know, and I think once people are able to do things with the support when needed in this primary school, like my next neighbour, Anthony, he's got autism, and yeah, and now the system is now going back to the 70s and the 80s, where they were put into mainstream and with support. But I think we need time to change and make things happen. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I was like, I think that was a brilliant question, but I kind of am feeling the same as you, like, I'm like with you on every word, but then as I'm with you, I've kind of forgotten what you've just said. So like at the end of the question, you were like, and yeah, and I was like, yeah. I didn't know where to start, so I just want to say that, yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I'm just not completely sure how to articulate an answer because I feel like I'm a bit lost with lots of information. Is that okay? Sorry.
I suppose I have some slightly different thoughts about that, but I think that you're right about like there's the wider implications of prioritizing the science over like understanding the world and creative activities. It's kind of driven by the idea that we need to be more productive and that productivity is science and tech. Not that actually, in order for that productivity to work in ways that are sympathetic to and help us, they need to be in tune with us. And that actually, I would say, it's never been more important to prioritize giving people creative skills, because actually without that you're just turning everyone into consumers, and that there's both the power to create and actually the skills to understand. And I think it's really easy to feel like a lot of the things happening in government and policy are just kind of too complicated. But if there's a thing that you feel strongly about, and I think this is hugely important, then I think one of the things I'm struggling with now in 2018 is how to make a stand. Politics in this country doesn't seem to work anymore. So, I think my answer to you is I agree, and as a person who has spent like the last 10 years trying to create change, one of the things I'm really concerned about now is how to do that when we're operating in a system that is broken, and I think the only thing is to carry on, but like if anyone has any thoughts, I would love to hear them.
Cecilia, we've got a question from Rubina.
Happy to watch. So I'm interested to listen to the story altogether, talking about change. At the moment, are we really ready for change? Why are we frightened of it? I feel that it seems as though we're worried. So if we move on and we go ahead with change, we're taking a risk. And it might be a risk of breakdown. However, the society is already broken, the education system is already broken, the arts and music now, they've been cut from our education and our children and our future. What about the future generations? How are they going to access art and music? Now, I feel like we already have the problem, so for the future generations, that problem is already there. So the government should be responsible to think about how to change this within organisations, arts organisations specifically, to do this in schools and make a change. Also, if you think about mental health, the emotional well-being of children in education, the mental health of all society, I feel we need to look at the bigger picture. I'm a qualified art therapist myself. I work in schools. I help children who have gone through trauma. So at the same time, I'm an artist. I'm a practitioner. I think of myself as an artist practitioner. So how can I function in a society when really we need the change. We need to change the way that we're working, the way that we're thinking. That we need to change the structure of the organisations to help the new generation think differently from now on, not going back to the past. We're talking about the 70s and the 80s. Okay, you know, I was born at that time. You know, the presentations, you know, we're talking about historically the 40s and the 50s, the effects, all that old information. But really, I feel we haven't really moved on with our time. We need to move on, move with the times, make the change, and think about how our new generations, our new artists, creating digital art, for example. I hate the digital art, to be honest. But, you know, that's the attitude of the future. That's the attitude. That's the future. We have to accept that. You know, artists and painters. I love the smell of the wood, the paint, everything. The experience, digital art. You know, it's centralised. It's just not my bag. However, it's lovely to look at. But, you know, and it's easy to print. But at the same time, let's think, you know, it's the new generation. It's what the children want. That's the education. So we need to educate them to change. But are we ready to accept the change in the education system, you know, without the power to control it? So, for example, the Arts Council, with their help, if they can help and fund us and support that change, to worm our ways into school to help these children, those who are suffering. You know, we have the experience, we have the skills, and we're not using them. You know, why are we sat back?
There's a question just behind Rubina as well.
There was also a question here as well.
We'll come back.
From this really fast thing, it will be slower now. I'm not mother language English. So, my question, I have to say also something to the lady. I live in Switzerland, and for the request of funding, for example, for mental problems, we had a simple problem for our production. My wife and I will work together, and we needed money for babysitting. And we asked, how is it possible to ask also for some money for babies? They said, we don't know, we have never done it, try to ask. So I think if you start asking, they will recognize the need, and they will start thinking about it. That's one thing. That was really fast before. My question is about the power. You Abid, you said to give space, and how can we convince the persons, or how can we do this? That, for example, as Caroline said, the director before, she was a visionary person, and she made space. How do we convince, for example, politics? We say the system is broken, to convince them to make space. Because they need this broken system, otherwise they lose their power. I don't think they want to lose it.
Any thoughts from the panel?
I mean, money is a great way of making the space, and that without it, a lot of things aren't able to happen. I mean, and so I think that's probably aimed mostly at you.
So, for example, I think one of the things which is really interesting is, can we begin to explore a little bit more around tenured contracts? So actually when an artistic director or a chief executive is appointed, rather than saying it's a contract for life, do we say 5 years and then you have to hand over power? That's quite key. I think there's also, I guess, an element which is recognizing that a lot of us actually work incredibly hard to get to a position where we can kind of create change, and sometimes we can then also become the obstacles to change in the future for other people. And I think that part of it is about what Caroline was talking about, being an accomplice and an ally, which is about when you are in a position of power, how do you begin to do things differently? So I'm in a position of privilege. When I took on this job, I didn't want to do it in the same way previous people have done it. I needed to do it my way. I spent a year going around the country, talking to people, listening to people. We wouldn't have developed the Elevate or the Changemakers program if we hadn't spoken to people. I remember writing a paper to our National Council in 2014 saying, these are all the things I want to do. A year later, I wrote another paper saying I don't want to do any of those things. But it was important I was able to do that, because suddenly when you speak to the people that you're there to serve, they say to you, actually, this is what we need. We did an evaluation of the Elevate program, and the feedback we got was, for the first time, we could compete against those organizations that don't have to worry about how they're going to fundraise their salary. It's little things like that that you can begin to make a difference. It's a change of mindset, and we can't keep doing things the same way. And in the same way, my challenge would be to boards and the individuals who make recruitment decisions. Too often, people recruit in the image of the person that they're looking to replace. And we need to kind of shift the culture of doing that. And that's why it's so important for people in this room to be on boards, to be influencing some of those decisions. So I hope that kind of partly goes towards answering your question. There's a question here, and then we'll bring it back to the panel to do their second set of presentations.
Hello. I've come down from Northumberland to this, which I would just like to say, this is a totally different world to the world that I live in. I work with learning disabled artists in Northumberland. I was meant to be with one of those artists at this conference. He decided he'd rather go on holiday, so he's not here. So I'm here for Tim, and I'll be going back and talking to Tim about what we've been all talking about here, hopefully. I don't know if I'll be able to remember everything. Anyway, what I would like to say is, it's a question, are MPOs best placed to create change when we're not seeing ourselves reflected there? We're certainly not seeing that in Northumberland. I think also class has been missing from the discussions around intersectionality. I'd also say learning disability has been as well. A lot of the work and a lot of the discussions I've seen here have been very London-centric. I think it's fair to say that. I'd also like to support Sarah and what she was saying before there. We've been working together through the Creative Minds work to represent learning disabled artists. I'd much rather Tim was here saying that today than me. I think I'd like to just flag up what's next. How we're gonna move forward from what we're all talking about today. I'm hoping that there'll be some discussions around that. And I'd also say I'd just like to think about the whole idea of activism by doing, by being there. We're an independent organisation. We've been working for 25 years. We see ourselves as activists. We're kind of quietly doing it up there near Scotland. You know. Okay. My contribution.
I'll respond to a couple of those points quickly before handing over to Abby. I think you make a completely valid point. Our MPOs can't just be the only bastions of what arts and culture is in England. And for me, it's really important that we can actually make sure that funding reaches everybody. I live in Birmingham. I enjoy coming to London. I enjoy leaving London fairly quickly afterwards as well. And I think it's really important that we do recognise the role that we have to play in terms of advocating and creating those opportunities for people around the country. You made a very good point about class and socio-economic background. It's one of the big areas for us as an Arts Council that we feel we need to do more on. So we're currently doing some pilot work. Because again, I grew up in a community where, irrespective of your background, you face the same barriers because of some of the issues that those local neighbourhoods had. So I think it's a really important aspect. And it comes back to what I spoke about briefly in the presentation, that our work around diversity can't just be driven around legislation. Legislation doesn't cover issues around class and socio-economic background, certainly in England. And I think we have to hold ourselves to a higher level of account, recognising that there's different ways that we need to engage with people. But thank you for sharing what you did. Abby, can I hand over to you to do the second part of your presentation?
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm going to do another blinking presentation. But it won't be too long, and hopefully it'll be a bit more informal, and then maybe we can have a few questions afterwards, or if there's time. Great, so for this short presentation, I'm going to focus in on the work that I spoke about earlier, which is called Ish. Can I have the first slide? Do you have my slides? Great, which is called Ish, and this is the piece I spoke about earlier, and today I'm just going to expand on it and speak a bit about the creative ideas and the artistic processes behind it, and also why I decided to make a work called Ish, and a work about in-betweenness and how I feel about that. So I should probably tell you a little bit about what dyspraxia is. Raise your hand if you do know what dyspraxia is. I know there's some people in the house with deaf. Oh my God, this is amazing! Yes, completely. Great, well I probably won't need to tell you what it is then. This is genuine, yes?
There's an audience that are not here that might not know what it is.
That's right. Wait, what? So there's an audience that aren't here that... Oh, great, okay. Oh, so to the people that are watching it elsewhere, okay. Those people raising your hands at home, and those people not raising their hands at home, get ready for a definition, because it's coming to you. So there's so many definitions of dyspraxia, and it's really hard to actually pinpoint what the thing is. And actually, there's a guy called David Grant, who's a chartered psychologist, and he's great. And he's actually said that we should talk about the dyspraxias and not dyspraxia, because actually there's no one singular definition of what that is, and it's unique to the individual. And actually the characteristics of dyspraxia can be, I was going to say sprawling, but I don't mean that, like vast, like from cognitive, physical, emotional, behavioral, like it's so much more than the clumsy child syndrome that it's known as kind of in the literature, and that idea that it's just clumsiness that's kind of still residual within our understanding. So the definition I was going to offer is that it's a delay or disorder of the planning and or execution of complex movement. I think it's more than that, but that's a definition that I like to use when I'm talking about dance, because it kind of brings the central focus of what I'm interested in. So how can you have what would a choreographic practice look like when the person who's making the choreography and performing the choreography can't remember what they're supposed to be performing? Happens all the time. And that's what I identify with and what I'm interested in interrogating. Yes. So as dyspraxia is a neurological difference, it's an invisible difference. There is there's a possibility of the kind of like hard signs of dyspraxia in terms of like the clumsiness and all that kind of stuff that might be visual signifiers of difference, but the condition generally is invisible. And I've found that most of the time, I've found that these characteristics that I have can be misunderstood and not understood as a valid difference. So, for example, maybe I'm just clumsy or quirky or intense or too emotional or flaky or ditzy or slow, things like that, that just, because it's not like, hey, I'm here and this is valid, people just can understand it in a way that is normative in that language. I don't know. It's a really tricky, sticky situation. The bubbling under the surface and my alternative neurological wiring and its processes can't be seen because I am perceived as a non-disabled person. And sometimes if I ask for an access need, that cannot be respected. Or maybe I'm just being a bit of a diva, or maybe I'm being lazy, or something like that. And there's a quite complicated political negotiation with this concept of in-betweenness and visibility in relation to dyspraxia and a disabled identity. Because I pass as non-disabled, and with that is a whole big bunch of privilege that I carry, and I really want to acknowledge that here, that is something that I possess, and that, yeah, and that's a part of what I'm talking about here as well. But I also do have a disabled experience, and particularly within a dance environment. And that's been a significant impact on me and is a continuing factor within my place as a dance artist in the industry. So it's a really difficult territory to trace, basically, because I feel like I constantly inhabit a strange, murky or sticky territory between perceptions of disability and non-disability, straddling the identities and not really knowing my place or how I identify. Yeah, and there's also this double invisibility with dyspraxia because a lot of people tend to know like what dyslexia is or what ADHD is on the mainstream level, and that's, yeah, and people know what dyslexia is more, and people are always going, dyspraxia, what's that? And then I end up going, oh, it's kind of physical version of dyslexia because I'm trying to find a way of communicating it. That was a tangent. What was I talking about? Hang on. What was I saying? Sorry. I'm looking at you because I have to find my page. Invisible privilege, I lost my page. Oh yeah, so there's this double invisibility where not only do I have an invisible difference, also if I turn up to a dance class and go, hey, I'm dyspraxic, people then don't, or a lot of the time, a lot of the dance tutors I've worked with then don't know what that is. So there's this double visibility that if I go, hi, I'm going to disclose this and make this visible, they're then like, I don't know what that is. What do I do? So it's very complicated. As a lot of these things that we're talking about are, naturally. So this is the central concept for Ish, this idea of in-betweenness, and the whole work is structured by a set of vignettes, which are like little micro-performances. And in those little vignettes, those micro-performances, I'm playing with different dichotomies to play with the space that's in between two ends. So for example, rising, falling, steady, wobbly, mind, body. That's a big one. Mind, body is a big one. And the macro performance, as in like the whole thing, is structured with the dichotomy of on and off stage. And that unfolds throughout the whole piece. Am I talking too long? Okay, I've got a couple of minutes. Okay, let's go. Okay, so the central thing with this work is like, how do you make an invisible difference visible through performance and communicate the experience of that hidden difference? And also, how do I do that without just talking? So yeah, how do I practically embody or show what these things are? And that's, yeah, the big part of the work. And because it's a dance piece, it makes sense that I communicate that in a visceral and kinesthetic way that's true to the difference that I'm talking about. So I want the work to do what it's about. And I use different strategies of movement to create choreography that I feel embodies my identity as a dyspraxic maker. I am running out of time, so I'll do these really quickly. You can just tell me very firmly. So strategy, I'll just quickly talk through some strategies. So strategies used in the piece to be assistive to my needs and also communicate dyspraxicness through dance. So the piece is like semi-improvised within a very certain structure. So it's structured enough so that I feel comfortable in what I'm doing, but also that I don't have to remember specifically what I'm doing, if that makes sense. So there's like loose scores, and tasks is a big thing. So a lot of the choreography comes from a task with objects, which is something that I'm going to talk about in a minute. Tasks, semi-structured, improvised. Okay. Oh yeah, so there's also things I've put into the work which can assist this fleeting memory that I have, and that's particularly within the audio-visual design that will flash up the next bit, which will help me remember that so I know what I'm doing. And I'm really, with this piece, I've wanted to make sure that my movement is a conscious move away from virtuosic languages, and it's a very clear deviation from that standard. And the whole work is characterized by chaos and is very open to that. And that acts as a wider frame that allows dyspraxic behavior to sit in the work without seeming like an anomaly, if that makes sense. It's kind of like the norm is dyspraxicness, so any little mishaps that happen are all a part of it, which is great for me. So I'm using various objects in the work to help communicate, embody, and amplify dyspraxicness and what I consider to be dyspraxic qualities. So I'm using a space hopper, as I said, helium balloons. Yeah, there's some other stuff in there as well. And I chose these because they have their own performative personalities, and they have their own movement vocabularies and their own agencies, and they kind of embody the dysfunctionness of dyspraxia. Like, they're very they just do what they want, and it's a bit wild. So again, I'm trying to communicate those qualities in lots of different ways through my movement, but also through, and also using those objects enables movement. So it isn't just expressive, it's also functional or part of a task. Yes. And the objects also are reminiscent of childhood, so it's also a link to this idea of clumsy child syndrome and common perceptions of dyspraxia, but I'm an adult wrestling with that. And I think I'll just leave it there, actually, because I feel like I could just talk about this forever, and actually, you if you're able to, if that's space in your schedule, come and see the show, and then you don't have to hear me talking about it. Thanks.
Rachel, you mentioned earlier the incentive of a book.
Yes.
So I'm going to hand over to you.
That are hiding under the table. And I have some slides. Where's the clicker gone? Here's the clicker. Now, I suppose I'm aware that what I'm about to talk about may not seem directly relevant to, for instance, some of the issues I heard you talking about. But I guess the reason I'm here is one of the things I try and do quite a lot of is negotiate with and persuade people who have power to give that power away. And the rooting I have in the arts, among other things, I spent a long time working at the Royal Opera House, which is a big NPO. And during the time I was there was a change at the beginning of that time. There was very much a culture where the resource and the opportunity that we had was there to be shared. It was there for the sector. And then as the funding in the world changed, one of the things that happened is there was a real lack of generosity. Like when there was a feeling that we had less resource, rather than thinking how can we do things in a different way, it was how can we hold on to the things that we have. And I eventually left because that wasn't an environment I really wanted to work in. But the big challenge is how do you encourage generosity in people who have power? And if you have power, how do you give it away? And that's a huge kind of status change. But I will very quickly talk about this book, which, if you like reading, is here. It's an e-book as well, which is available to download on our site, and I can tweet the links to that later. And this is a book of 6 stories and a poem written by women about the future. And the reason we created this is because I work in an industry that is very white, very male, that it's changing the whole of the world, but the perspective that is changing the whole of the world is privileged and not representative of everyone. And that is affecting us all in ways that we're aware of and not. For instance, it's changing how democracy works, say, in ways that will continue to ripple for years and years and years, and that we're only just trying to understand now. And the technology industry, I would like it to be more responsible. We talk about responsibility as being aware of the consequences, aware of the context and the consequence of your actions, as opposed to just acting totally into the here and now, and more diverse and more inclusive. And at the moment in tech, right, at the rate that things are happening in this amazing industry that is changing everything, it will take till 2094 to get to gender parity. 2094, that's a really, 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 really long time. And in the innovation world, which is like R&D and inventing and that kind of thing, it will take to 2136. Now, I kind of feel that women are more than half the people in the world at the moment. They're like 51%. This is ridiculous, right? And there are lots of schemes, there are lots of women in tech training things, there are groups to join, there are activities to be a part of, and none of it is working. None of it is working, and one of the reasons is because the people who are being excluded do not have permission to enter, right? They don't have permission to have the power, and it isn't interesting. Like, I don't really want to work in an industry that is all about takeaway delivery and getting people to work in secure jobs. Like, there are lots of things the industry is doing that are not positive, that are not the world I want to see. And I kind of think that if technology was making a different outcome, then different people would be a part of it. So this group of people here, this picture here is about a year and a half old. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 men. They are white and Asian. They're all dressed quite casually. They are the engineers who wrote the Facebook news feed timeline. Those 8 people determine how 2.2 billion people see information every day. And the things that they think are important are the things that surface. And like, the obvious thing about that group is they are all men. And that seems lazy, right? And this person here, which you can't really see, this is Jeff Bezos hiding up there. He's the person who runs Amazon, right? And he's in this like huge, weird exoskeleton, which is like, he wants to be in the movie. Like, he has all this money and power, and he wants to be Terminator, right? I'm not even joking about this, right? This is like power to him. I could talk for like a week about Elon Musk, who I don't know if anyone here has heard of, but I'm obsessed with him. He's the person who owns Tesla, and like his whole right, he has a whole career out of making things that are like penises that go into things. This is like a boring machine that is boring holes into the center of the Earth. He makes rockets that go into space. He makes cars that go on forever and ever and ever, like Viagra. And honestly, and no one laughs at him. Everyone's like, oh yes, he's very wise. He's got a lot of money. And he really, really, really likes the novels of Ian M. Banks. And he kind of has oddly interpreted the future that is in those books as looking like this, which I don't understand. But the important thing, the point of this, and I have to speed up, is there is a really close marriage of sci-fi to tech. And a lot of the things that everybody uses all the time are inspired directly by stories. So there's Nokia flip phones, like are the Star Trek communicators, for instance, you know, and a lot of the technology we're using all the time comes out of stories generally written by the white men, turned into movies and then picked up by the white male innovators. The contrast here is really bad, but this is Shuri in the movie The Black Panther, who is a young black woman inventor who's creating all kinds of things and creating a world, and is a really unusual representative of difference and difference in the power of making. I would just go on really quickly here, but there's lots of evidence to support that representation is a hugely important part of the opportunity to make the difference. And without it, not only is it difficult for, say, me as an individual to ask for permission to do something, it's very difficult for the people who have power to understand that they can give it to me because they've never seen it happen before. And that if you can't make a change in the real world, write a story, right? Show how it looks, show alternatives, because people can bring things to mind in all kinds of other ways. I don't even know the reason he's here. But, oh, I do. Right, this is Tim Cook, who runs Apple, and he does a keynote every year to say, these are the cool things that Apple are launching. And I think the next one is next week. And I would like a world where in the 5 years, 10 years, that was someone like Shuri. It isn't another white dude. And so we had some funding from Nesta to commission this. Over the autumn, we're going to be sending it to 100 men in tech who have power and asking them to hand their power over to another individual, and hope that some of the stories in here help inspire them to see something else. And I think that's it. Here's the book. I'll hand them out. Thank you.
We have about 5 minutes left, so maybe we can take a couple of questions or head down for lunch early, beat the queue. I leave it up to you. We've got questions. One over here.
Hi, my name is Paul Wilshaw. I am a learned disabled artist from Mind the Gap, and I've just become on the board of Disability Arts Online. My major thing is that we're always talking about money and all this, but for learned disabled artists, the pay system is a really difficult one, because parents are scared that their child or their adults are going to lose their benefits if they get into the industry. And as we all know, it's such a short, 6-month contract you could have, and then you lose your money from that. Until we can really get onto the government and try and sort the situation out with that, I really think parents and the change of the attitudes is really not going to happen until we can change parents' attitudes and school attitudes as well, because we were told a lot at mainstream schools the arts is not an industry to get into because it's such a short time career. So I think we've got to really try and change parents, and I think the Arts Council and British Council are changing their attitudes, but till you get the main parents and the people that really matter to change their attitudes, then it's a losing battle in that sense.
No, thank you for that. I think it's... And I have to say, I mean, this is where the sector has been taking a real leadership issue, because I think organisations like Mind the Gap, Heart and Soul, have been talking about these issues for a number of years. And certainly I think it also goes beyond navigating the funding system. I talked earlier about the number of disabled artists who work as independents. Then you also have to navigate the tax systems, all the other stuff that comes in the way, and you're kind of having to have the same struggle to overcome the barriers. And I think that's something where both the Arts Council and the British Council can play a key role. I know Andrew's here as well, and as one of our change makers, but also a champion for disability arts and culture who can have a conversation with government. I think it's the points we talked about earlier, where unless we ask the question, sometimes we don't start the conversation. And certainly from my perspective, it's hard enough for anybody to earn a sustainable income in this sector, and it's harder for disabled artists in particular. And the number of artists who have said to me, when they come in for grants for the arts or project funding, they haven't built in any money for themselves, because if they took that funding, the amount of time it would take to get their benefits restored, it creates complete havoc. And that's a system that doesn't work. And genuinely, if there's anything we can do to work with you to kind of make that case, then we will do that.
If I could just come back on that. I think it'd be really helpful, because, you know, even as arts admin, then sometimes where we know, you know, that actually if you approach the Arts Council and you talk to them, then you can get access support for writing a grant for the arts application. And so when artists kind of talk to us about those sorts of things, then that's the message that we give back to them. But I think it would also be helpful for that message to spread out wider, and even from the Arts Council, just to make that really clear to everyone who's working
I think this is a wider issue, because I think the access support is there, but I think there's this additional barrier where how many of us would submit an application for funding if we were told, if you paid yourself, this is X, Y, and Z repercussions. So I think this is a kind of wider systemic issue that we need to address. In addition to kind of removing the barriers to applying for funding, I think it's recognising even when you apply for funding, you can't actually get the funding that you want and need, because I think it's about you wanting to be an artist. So I think there's a bigger conversation here that we need to be supportive of. Yeah. Cool. I think that brings us to lunch. Thank you very much for your patience and your time, and see you in a bit.
So lunch is downstairs again in the foyer, and we'll be back in here for the discussion about the future at 2 p.m. And I think that Rachel is looking for... Rachel has all these wonderful books, Women Invent the Future, that she's able to give out to anyone who wants them. Okay, thanks everyone.